Hello and good evening. My name is Wannette and I am the head of EDIA for the Faculty of Business and Law. I'm also a student experience manager and associate lecturer in the law school, and I am delighted to host this first of our sessions, Bringing Law to Life, which is a series of conversations with our associate lecturers who are also practitioners in the legal profession. Now, we know that conventionally the legal profession has had some challenges in being diverse and representative, and that for law students today, this is still something of an obstacle to see their own journeys and selves reflected in the legal profession today. So this series of conversations, which we are starting tonight with my colleague Frances Lyons, is designed to help to improve and see that modeling happening in the legal profession, and to answer some of the questions that you as law students might have about the legal profession and how to get your start there after graduation. So I'm ably assisted tonight by my fellow colleague Joanna Merrick-Tooth in the background, who's going to handle our tech, and I'm delighted to welcome this evening Frances Lyons, who's an associate lecturer in the law school. And Frances is also a solicitor, and Frances specializes in areas of energy companies and infrastructure company law. So Frances is going to talk to us about the ups and downs of a day in the life of a solicitor, the challenges of the profession, some of the emerging themes, and how to achieve that work-life balance, with particular consideration for accessibility for those who are care experienced. Welcome, Frances. Thank you for joining us. Let's begin, Frances, by you telling us a little bit about your career journey. How did you become a solicitor in this area?
Thank you very much for that lovely welcome, Wannette. So I became a solicitor in 2005, and I qualified in 2007. So goodness me, that's nearly 20 years ago now. And I got my training contract with a small, medium-sized London city law firm that specialised in housing, construction, energy, and public sector law. And it was a really interesting place to start my career with really great work. Interestingly, you might be intrigued to know my story before that was my very first job was sorting post in a post room of a law firm. So when I graduated, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into the law, and I just got a job delivering post to various departments in a small local law firm in Liverpool, near where my parents lived. And by delivering the post quite well and getting to know the partners in the law firm, that kind of escalated to me being offered a bit of paid experience with the family law department and the personal injury department. And that gave me my first kind of foot in the door, so to speak, which is the hardest bit with law. And once I'd managed to get that little bit of work experience in the post room and in the family and personal injury departments, that meant then that I could apply for what's known as a vacation scheme, which is a kind of work experience placement which a law firm does. And I applied to one of the big commercial firms, and because I'd got a bit of work experience, I'd shown my worth, I'd shown that I was interested in the law. They then took me for a summer placement for 2 weeks. And then once I got the kind of glossy commercial law firm name on my CV, I was able to apply for a training contract. So it was a slow process, but it just shows what you can achieve, because essentially I started off in the post room and I ended up getting a training contract with a law firm. And so really my big message from that would be all experience is good experience, and any way you can get into the law and see what happens on the ground and meet lawyers or paralegals or people working in the law is brilliant. I guess I'm evidence of the fact that you can go from the post room into a training contract.
Thanks so much, Frances, for explaining your journey from post room to solicitor with glossy law firm. I'm sure our students are going to have lots of questions for you. So to the students who are here in the room with us, you can post your questions in the Q&A pod that we have open, and we'll take those at the end of this presentation. So Frances, you've talked our students through some of the schemes that are available, things like summer schemes and vacation schemes. What advice would you give to our students about gaining experience where they have no contacts?
I would say think really laterally, because often when we think of jobs in the law, we think of the traditional training contracts as a kind of prize that we're aiming for. But there's actually the law in many different places. And you can do things like volunteer with the Citizens Advice Bureau. If you're a law student, they would love to have you. And you can do all that training remotely now. I think you just do a training course on a Friday evening with the Citizens Advice Bureau. But also think about where law pops up other than law firm, or which places other than law firms the law pops up in. Things like schools, a business development manager, they're dealing with contracts. If you work for a company, there might be a legal team, or they might have external lawyers that you could work with. Again, you can even just go into a court and watch proceedings and see what a court case is like. I would just say think unusual and unusual and varied methods, and think where the law pops up. And it could be anything. It could be book publishing. It could be what your local council does. It could be talking to a police officer about their job in criminal law. It could be anything. So think widely, because the law intersects with all different kinds of life and pops up all over the place. So don't be too tied down to just thinking about a training contract.
Thanks, Frances. And as you've demonstrated, the journey to the legal profession, it doesn't always begin with a training contract. So it's good to think laterally and think outside the box. Do you have any target advice for our students about making an application to a law firm for work?
You might have to do quite a few, is the honest truth. Just because these law firms get so many applicants. I think I read that there's roughly 3 times the amount of law graduates as opposed to jobs. So a lot of these law firms will get a lot of applications. So don't be discouraged if you put your first few in and you don't get there. I know some really good lawyers who made 50 or 60 applications. I would say they're quite time consuming because most of the applications are bespoke and different. So often you'll find that they've got specific questions for that law firm. So there is some stuff that you can cut and paste, your A levels, your university course results and things like that. But you have to kind of hone in on each application and treat it individually. So it takes time, but I would say just be really patient and apply slowly and carefully, and just try and apply for lots of different kinds of organisations. You've always got to have a bit of an eye on who's recruiting, which can be partly economics. For example, I grew up near Liverpool and I had no luck for training contracts in Liverpool, Chester or Manchester, nothing. And then in London, there happened to be a lot more jobs, which is how I made my journey down south. And I got a interview very quickly in London and a job offer very quickly, but it's because there were less jobs up north. But I do think that's changed now with remote working, and I think there's some great regional firms. Things aren't as London centric as they were in my day. But yeah, be prepared to think outside the box and look a bit further than where you live. And just be aware they'll be getting lots of applications. So be patient and do as many as you can.
Thanks, Frances. That's really practical insights about gaining experience and making applications. Can you tell us then about your profession and how accessible and diverse is your area of law?
So my area of law was actually really diverse. So I used to work for the public sector law department, which had a lot of charities, government departments, probably slightly more what would have been a bit more alternative clients for this than you'd normally find in the city, which was why I actually went for that law firm, because I loved its diversity. But I think in terms of diversity of background, the law probably wasn't brilliant. And probably the people getting training contracts were all quite similar, but I think that has changed, and a lot of employers are trying to be a bit more diverse in terms of their recruitment base. And I would say 20 years ago, there was a lot of where did you go to school? Who did your father work for? All of this kind of stuff. And I think a lot of that is going, and a lot of organisations do much fairer recruitment now. I know the government does. So they're not necessarily looking at your backgrounds and connections and where you went to school, but perhaps you might get a competency-based exercise and that kind of thing. So I have seen a big change in the legal profession, and it has got a lot more diverse and inclusive, but probably not as much as it should be still. So,
That's a
but
great segue,
don't
Frances, to my next question then.
Yeah.
If it's getting better, but there's still a ways to go, what are the specific considerations or factors related to EDIA that you're seeing in your sector?
I think there's still obstacles around. I mean, the lifestyle of a lawyer is never that easy. You know, if your client says you're needed for a meeting tomorrow, you've got to be there. And I still think, as a mother who's got small children, sometimes clients or my boss don't realise that you can't just suddenly drop everything and be at a meeting tomorrow at 9 o'clock, unless you've had a bit of notice. So I think it can be difficult if you've got childcare responsibilities or you're looking after elderly people, or perhaps you're not necessarily confident going into a face-to-face environment. I think some of those things can still be barriers. Can you just repeat the question, Wannette?
About some of the EDIA considerations or factors that you see in your sector.
Yeah, I mean, I think there have been improvements. I mean, my most recent client in private practice has been really inspirational because they had a female CEO and 70% female senior executives. But unfortunately, the CEO got the sack a year ago, and then all of her wing women went with her, really. So it's all changed again. I have definitely seen a lot more developments. I think remote working has been a really good thing in terms of EDI. It means people can be a bit more flexible and can log in from different places, or particularly if you're disabled or neurodiverse, it can sometimes be a bit easier to handle. Not always, not in every case, but sometimes being able to do stuff remotely is a bit easier for people, and you can have, you know, your books open in front of you or your notes. You don't always have to have a camera on, that kind of thing. There's a bit more optionality. But I would say that things have improved. I'd say certainly government organisations and the charitable sector are very good at EDI issues, and a lot of employers now really want to have quite good EDI figures to show their diversity, which means that they appeal more to people who want to work for them. They appeal more to clients. There has definitely been a move in that direction. Still lots to do, but.
So what advice would you give our students then on overcoming any hurdles of accessibility?
I would probably say don't be afraid to be vulnerable and human with people. I mean, you still need to be professional, and if you're going in for work experience or a job interview, you know, you still want to talk about the job role and your qualities. But I think there's a lot of people who are really understanding around these issues, and it's not always a bad thing to talk about what you're finding difficult and to be a bit honest and vulnerable in the workplace within limits. You know, you need to find the appropriate time for those conversations, but honesty can be a good policy a lot of the time.
Thanks, Frances. That's a really encouraging insight. You've talked a little bit about what you do and who you're kind of working. So can you cover for us the people, the agencies, and the stakeholders that you work with in your profession?
Yeah. Goodness, there's many of them in the kind of work I do. So a lot of the work that I do is energy infrastructure projects. So you quite often have the government have a stake in the project. You might have external funding. You might have banks or pension funds that are investing in the scheme. So the one I'm working on at the moment has some Canadian pension funds who are investing in our energy, and you also have the local community. So often infrastructure projects are not very popular. You know, it might be building a road through someone's backyard or a waste treatment plant, or often they're big, noisy construction projects. So there has to be a lot of stakeholder management at a local level. You've then got regulatory bodies. So you'd have people like the Environment Agency or Ofgem, the energy regulator involved. And you've then usually got a very big client team with lots of different departments all doing different things, you know, financing, planning, employment, HR. So you have to be able to manage all of those. And then you also get other external lawyers who might not agree with you, and you might have to negotiate with them, or, you know, collaborate together to get something to work. So in what I do, there tend to be quite a lot of stakeholders, but that's why I quite enjoy it, actually. People,
That's an
yeah.
amazing diverse range of stakeholders and dimensions that you are working with. So you've given us a little bit of a hint about the demands of the job. How do you describe the work-life balance of your profession?
This is the one where I probably sound a bit less positive. I have to be honest, the law is a profession of detail, and that can mean that you do have a lot of detail to work through. So in what I do, the detail is usually in contracts, and reading through the detail. When I started out in the law, my boss told me that before the internet and IT, people used to type up a contract and then they would amend it and pop it in the post to the other side, and the other side would amend it with a different colour pen, and it would do the rounds around all the people who needed to sign the contract. And because contracts were a lot simpler then, the whole thing was a lot quicker. But now we can create these huge, you know, I mean, 3,000, 4,000 pages isn't even that bad in what I do. But you often get these big contracts with huge appendices as well. Or you get a very complex intersection of lots of different legal agreements. You might have like a shareholders agreement, funding documents. You'll have a license with the government saying what you can and can't do. You'll have planning permission. So it is a profession of being on top of the detail, and that is time consuming. But I think, you know, you learn strategies for dealing with it and trying to squash it into a 9 to 6. You
Okay.
know, particularly, you know, working well as a team and having other people to work with, or maybe you work part-time and it's a job share. But the law will always be quite demanding due to attention to detail. So that is definitely still a challenge. And I know that AI is touted as a bit of an answer to that, in that I think my clients often use things like Copilot, but AI is not totally accurate when it comes to the law. So it still is an exercise of checking those terms and conditions, certainly in what I do.
Thanks, Frances. That's a unique way of describing the legal profession, that it's one of details, and appreciate you highlighting that AI is not the panacea that
No, I wish
we
it
want
was.
to hold it. So you've given us a bit of a hint about some of the key players in your journey to the law. Can you tell us about any specific role models or mentors that you had in your career journey?
Yeah, my boss for my current legal job was a massive mentor. So I was working really hard in the city for about 10 years, and I wanted a family. And to be honest, I just wasn't interested in becoming a partner. Like, I could see all these really competitive people around me, and they would have murdered their own grandmothers to get there. And I just thought, I don't really want to sit in a law firm in an air-conditioned office for any more than I have to. And this role model was like, just get out. You've got a great skills base. You've done this for 10 years. Why don't you try working for the government? Why don't you try working for a council? And it was a very informal mentorship, but he had himself worked for a big company and had kind of done his own path. And it was almost having that kind of role model to say, okay, it's all right. You don't need a set one path for the whole of your life. You can try different things. So he's still a great friend. And yeah, and I think just kind of having someone who's been through an experience like working for a big company before and how to survive in it and thrive in it is really invaluable. So yeah, use those informal connections as much as you can. They're brilliant if you can find someone you trust and will give you good advice. But a lot of law firms do, or companies generally do formal mentoring schemes. You know, you don't necessarily need a contact. Often a lot of companies will have things like that in them.
Thanks, Frances, because that's also really helps to illustrate that, you know, your skills and expertise can help you to make the most out of the work-life balance and to be accessible and flexible in your career journey. Do you have any other advice for students about where to go to find other role models?
Um, I would just get out there to events. Like I've heard some really inspirational speakers at the Law Society, and a lot of those speakers you can access remotely now. Finding people who are passionate about what they do is also really important. So, you know, maybe you know someone who's a criminal lawyer or a family lawyer and they're really interested. You could, I mean, there's a lot of books written by brilliant lawyers. Brenda Hale's written some brilliant books. So I would just think widely, you know, even just go to court and watch what people do and learn more about the profession. And yeah, I mean, you don't really get anything unless you try in life, do you? And unless you get out there and have a go at meeting people, you won't know. But probably even within your OU studies, you'll meet lots of really interesting tutors. Don't be afraid to talk to us. You know, a lot of people have worked in the law and will teach you while you're here. Don't be afraid just to say, have you got 5 minutes? Most of us are delighted to talk about what we do, even if it's boring and it's infrastructure law and not media law. But yeah, I'd just say don't be afraid to reach out to people. Maybe you're on a train and you know you work out that someone's a lawyer and you just have an informal talk to them. Be courageous and see what follows.
That's great to hear, Frances. Thank you so much for starting the first of these Bringing Law to Life conversations and for reminding and encouraging our students that, you know, all of us here in the law school, we're here to help you on your journey. So indeed, reach out if you have any questions. So that's all the questions I have for you, Frances. So now is the opportunity for our students in the audience to ask you any questions that they might have. We don't have any in the question and answer pod at the moment, but does anybody want to come on the mic? Do you have a question for Frances?
When you started your career as a solicitor in commercial law, what were the negatives?
When I started in commercial law, oh, I'm going to be really honest here. When you start out working for a law firm, you kind of think it's going to be like Suits or a movie, and you're going to get really interesting work. But usually, when you start out, you get very small, very menial, very repetitive jobs to see if you do those well. That will lead to better work. So. I think I was quite surprised at the amount of photocopying and note taking and that kind of stuff that I did to start. It wasn't as exciting as I thought it was going to be to start, but it did become exciting pretty quickly within time if you prove yourself. Yeah.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
That's a great question. And again, more practical details about life in the law firm from Frances there, in case anybody was wondering. Do we have any other questions that anybody would like to post in the question and answer pod, or you can put your hand up and come on the mic?
Please don't be shy as well. There's no question which is too silly, or it can be anything like you might be interested in becoming a barrister, solicitor. Anything you want to ask?
Could I ask a second question?
Of course.
Please.
Yeah, this is your chance.
I'm an aspiring barrister within the criminal and commercial areas.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a former chef and also Royal Naval Logistical. I'm completely new to this field, so I don't want to come across stupid. what would I need to do in order to meet the bar and SQE standards, etc.?
That's a really interesting question. Not being a barrister, I'm not, I'm not,
I'm completely
I'm
new
not,
to it, so I'm so sorry.
yeah. So normally you apply for what's called a pupillage, which is a bit like a training contract with chambers.
Okay.
Um, yeah, the great news is that you've got really good practical experience there. If you've worked in, did you say you've worked as a chef and
I
in,
started my I started my first career as a level one hospitality chef, as in grill chef and salad prep and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I had a mental breakdown and couldn't handle the pressures. But also I lost and suffered bereavement due to a lot of family issues,
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
and
that.
which led me into my career within the bar and barrister. Well, I wanted to be a solicitor, a criminal solicitor. But I was always told I would never meet the standards, I would never get it because I didn't go to school, etc. And now I'm questioning whether I've got the should one call it, to meet the standards within the solicitor's qualifying exam, both one and two, and get an inner chamber within pupillage or even mini pupillage. What would your advice be, Francis?
If you are interested in the SQE, they do have past papers on the SQE provider's website, so you could always have a little look at the kind of questions that come up with the SQE. I think it's one of those things of you'll only find out if you try, and it's worth just having a look at the past papers. It is certainly possible to qualify as a solicitor, which in some cases is a little bit easier than becoming a barrister, just because there's more jobs in the solicitor's profession.
Mhm.
So the bar is a relatively small world. I think
Right,
there's
okay.
10 times the amount of solicitors, but you can
Wow.
become something quite interesting called a solicitor advocate, which you're
I've
almost like
heard
a solicitor barrister. You are a solicitor, but you can stand up in court and talk on behalf of your clients to a judge, even though you're not a barrister. So there is a kind of
Oh,
hybrid option. But again,
okay.
I'd just say, try and get out there. Volunteering for the Citizens Advice Bureau would be a great way of learning how to advocate for clients.
Could
Um,
I do that as a W111 student as of October, or would my
I'm not,
eligibility be writ off?
I know they do take law students. I think it might be from your second year as a law student, but
Okay.
again, have a little peek on the Citizens Advice website and see. But I know that loads of my students have done that.
Okay.
You get a lot of things like debt claims and family law, or having to write letters. But you get supervised by a qualified solicitor, so it's a great way of getting a bit of experience.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you so much.
Well,
brilliant.
thank you for your really important
Yeah, really
question,
great
because the journey
question.
to the legal professions, it is a bit complicated and a bit confusing, and there's lots of different routes into the legal profession. So thank you for your question, because that's an excellent segue for me to take the opportunity to highlight our wonderful career resources here at the Open University. And on our Law Study Home website, there's specific information and advice directly related to careers where you can use your law qualification, not just in the legal profession, but other
Mm.
careers, thinking more laterally, like Francis has said. We also have a fantastic careers and employability service on the Help Centre. And here you can find guides, you can find online resources and tools, advice and activities to plan your career and to identify
Oh,
those
wicked.
career needs. We have a planning guide
Thank
which
you.
helps you to map out your pathway to success. So as you are a first year law student, helping you to think about what you're going to choose for your options in year 2 and 3, how to make the
Mm.
most of any opportunities to gain practical experience in those years. We have a number of workshops that are available on Opportunity Hub, including CV 360 and Interview 360 opportunities to improve your CV and to practice some of those interview techniques. And of course, you have access to one of our careers consultants, not just now, but for up to 3 years after you graduate. So you can book an appointment with a careers consultant at any time during your law degree journey. There's lots more resources for you as well. There are 3-minute careers check-ins to help you clarify your goals and to build your future with career confidence and navigate those pathways towards that career goal. Our Careers and Employability service also includes OU students and alumni who are able to tell you about why being an OU student has been an advantage when they have been making those job applications and going through interviews and progressing in their careers, so that you can understand that doing your degree online is not an exception. In fact, it makes you an exceptional candidate. And as I've said, at any time during your studies and up to 3 years, you can use our careers and employability resources, and that includes our consultations, and you can click on the link right there. Now, before we conclude, please do click on the link on the screen. And Joanna, can we also put this link in the Q&A pod as well? Please give us your feedback on what you have enjoyed about this session and what you'd like to see more of in our Bringing Law to Life sessions. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for your questions. And most of all, can I have a big round of applause to Frances Lyons, who has joined us today and who has given us such wonderful practical insights into the legal profession and specifically into her career. Frances, thank you again so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for hosting, Wannette, and then to everyone who attended. Thank you.
We'll see you at our next session. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.